afraid we're going to have to leave Nepal there because we have breaking news that's coming out from here, from the Qatari capital, where the Israeli military has confirmed that it's carried out a targeted assassination on Hamas. We heard loud explosions that were heard across Doha. Much of it was plumes of smoke. But let's speak to our correspondent, Nida Ibrahim, joining us live on set. Nida, you've been following this story that's unfolding as we speak. What do we know so far?
We've heard loud explosions here in Doha. Everyone was asking and wondering what has happened. Let's not forget that it comes just hours after the Israeli officials have been already threatening to assassinate Hamas members. What we've been hearing just in the past few seconds is a statement by the Israeli army and the Israeli security agency, the Shin Bet, saying that through the Air Force, they recently carried out a targeted strike against members of Hamas. They say that these leaders have been instrumental, and I'm quoting the statement, in the organization's activities and are directly responsible for the October 7 attacks. Now, they are saying in the same statement that prior to the strike, measures were taken to minimize harm to civilians. And Sarah, we don't know how many have been killed. We don't know the number of casualties there in Doha. We're still waiting for more and more updates. But the statement continues, and it reads that the Israelis have been using precision-guided munitions and additional intelligence information, and they end the statement by saying that they will continue to act decisively to defeat Hamas. Now, what has been happening already in Doha is that the Hamas delegation has been meeting to discuss the latest U.S. proposal to bring an end to, or at least a cessation of hostilities, as the Israeli forces have been trying and pushing forward a plan to seize Gaza City. We've been seeing this morning how the Israeli army has been asking people to leave, issuing evacuation threats and orders against Palestinians living inside Gaza, asking them to move south. And as we can say by many people who are observing, that this is yet another Israeli attempt to thwart any plans, any suggestions, any proposals to bring a cessation of hostilities. Palestinians would tell you that Israel wants to empty Gaza out of Palestinians one way or another. And yes, we've been hearing the Israeli forces threatening to arrest and to strike and kill Hamas members. But this is the first time such an attack happens in Doha, and confirmed by the Israeli army itself in a statement. This comes to show how Israel is continuing with its plans to assassinate Hamas members wherever they are.
And clearly, Nida, emboldened by this, because Qatar is one of the mediators, the US, Egypt and Qatar. The fact that it's attacking Hamas figures in Qatar as a mediator, that surely will be problematic with moving forward at all with these
Indeed,
talks.
and people would tell you that Israel has been emboldened by being able to carry out a genocide and get away with it. Now we are approaching the second anniversary of the war on Gaza, and really no one has been putting real and pressure on Israel to stop its war that has been targeting mostly Palestinian civilians, children, men and women who have nothing to do with anything. And if that strike goes to show anything, it shows how Israel has been really emboldened by its ability to avoid and to bypass all international laws, all international treaties, by now assassinating Hamas leaders inside Doha, the Qatari capital that has already been hosting the negotiation talks, that has already helped secure 2 ceasefires during this war, not just one. So we are talking about yet another Israeli attempt, this time fatal, to basically kill any opportunity for any ceasefire agreement.
Nida, I just want to update those that are joining us at the moment. Israel has confirmed that it's carried out strikes on Qatar. Specifically, they say attacking Hamas leadership at the moment. this is unprecedented, really. This is the first time such a thing happens. We were just mentioning there Qatar being a mediator. Let's just see, do we go to Hamda Salhout in Amman? Let's go to Hamda Salhout, who's following developments from Jordan's capital, and she's there because the Israeli government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting not just inside of Israel, but also occupied territories. Hamda, what are we hearing? Is there any update, whether it's from Israel, from the leadership, or even is there any of this being discussed in Israeli media?
Well, the Israeli military has confirmed that it carried out a joint attack with the internal security agency, that is the Shin Bet, to assassinate members of Hamas, though it doesn't name who. And it also doesn't say where these airstrikes took place. However, it is quite clear from the images we're seeing on our screen, of course, that they are in the Qatari capital, Doha. Let's just remind our viewers of the rhetoric of Israeli officials over the last 22, now 23 months, saying that wherever Hamas leaders are, they will reach them and assassinate them, similar to what they did to the group's former political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, back in Iran when he was assassinated in Tehran, the capital there. But these airstrikes are surely unprecedented. The statement goes on to say that they did what they can to mitigate civilian harm. Of course, something we've heard from the Israeli military before, but something to take also with a grain of salt, given how many civilians in the Gaza Strip have been killed over the last 2 years. But the Israeli military has been operating in the region with full impunity, with no consequences to any of their actions. It's worth mentioning that they have attacked so many countries in the region within the last several years. Just to name a few, you have got the Gaza Strip, you have the occupied West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, and now Doha. This is a country that is hosting mediation efforts to try and secure a ceasefire, that has been working tirelessly to try and get to some sort of agreement and framework to end the war. But this is surely going to be seen as an escalation, because the Israeli military is operating in a way where they haven't before, saying that they are going to take new measures, especially given these plans that were approved back in May to not only operate in Gaza City, occupy it, take total siege, but also to do things differently when it comes to the killing of anyone who's involved in Hamas, their leadership abroad, saying that wherever they are, they would reach them, that wherever, whatever countries they would in, they would assassinate them. So the Israelis are confirming that they've carried out this assassination attempt, but again, they're not saying who was targeted specifically in Hamas, and they did not say where these attacks were carried out. But nonetheless, an unprecedented moment as Israeli airstrikes have rocked the Qatari capital.
Hamda, we've had senior Hamas source tell Al Jazeera that the meeting, they were holding a meeting, and it was targeted while it was discussing President Trump's proposal for a ceasefire. Tell us more about what Israel has said in terms of that ceasefire, because it's indicated that it's accepted it. It seems to be a ceasefire proposal by Trump, vague, but at the same time, one where it's both countries are in cahoots on the details of that proposal.
Well, previously, there was a framework on the table around 3 weeks ago that Hamas said yes to, and the Israelis did not respond whatsoever, even though mediators said it had more than 90% of what Israel wanted inside of it, and that the other 10% could be worked on during the first days of the agreement, during the first days of the pause in the fighting. However, the Israelis never responded. They never said anything. They never showed any sort of interest in moving toward a deal. In fact, every time there was any sort of questioning for the Israeli government, they raised the stakes for what it would take to end the war on Gaza. But just this morning, the country's foreign minister has said that they would be willing to accept a framework. They would be willing to take what is currently being offered on the table, the newer proposal that's been released in just the last several days. But again, they say they have really tough red lines for what it's going to take for them to end the war, including the expulsion of all of Hamas from Gaza, the disarmament of of Hamas, some sort of new entity taking over the sort of civilian operations in the Gaza Strip, Israeli security control over the Palestinian territory. And you also have this right-wing vision for the expulsion of the Palestinian population in general from Gaza so that Israel can occupy and take over the territory entirely, not just in the north, not just Gaza City. So there are a lot of different visions within this right-wing government in Israel for what it's going to take to end the war. And as the days and months go on, those stakes rise each and every week. Previously, you had Netanyahu saying that he wouldn't end the war unless President Trump's previous, now condemned plan for expelling all Palestinians from Gaza were to take place. But the Israelis have said that they are going to operate in a different way. They were going to do the war differently than what they were doing within the last year or so, that they had a new plan of action. And remember that in the middle of the war, there was a new defense minister who came into play, Israel Katz. There's a new army chief of staff, Eyal Zamir. And these are all new tactics by the Israeli military because, look, after nearly 2 years, Israel has not accomplished anything that it wants to within Gaza. There are still 48 captives being held there. They have not defeated Hamas. Israelis do not feel any less or more safe than they did prior to the war. In fact, if you speak to Israelis, they'll tell you they actually feel less safe as a result of Israel's involvement in all of these conflicts. But now conducting an airstrike, an assassination attempt in the very place where these negotiations are taking place, with the negotiators themselves, the people who would come to the table to negotiate for the Palestinian group itself. If you eliminate them, what are you left with? So there are a lot of questions here as to what Israel is going to do moving forward, because if they are assassinating the leadership, they are assassinating the people on the other end of the table. So what does this mean for negotiations moving forward? What does this mean for Israeli military action in the Gaza Strip? What does it mean for the continuous plans to now take over Gaza City? As we've seen within the last several days, the airstrikes in and around Gaza City have been quite catastrophic. And in fact, you had 4 Israeli soldiers just in the last 24 hours who were killed by fighters in the Gaza Strip in the same area that Israel is hoping to occupy and siege. So a lot of moving parts here. But nonetheless, the Israelis have said that they are committed to continuing this war rather than ending it through diplomacy, rather than ending it through negotiations, and rather than ending the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza, but rather expanding their operations in the region entirely.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. Hamda Salhout there live for us in Amman.